Fawcett, and I'd like to tell you a little bit more about him. He was 94 in this picture. Looks pretty good. Here's when he was 90. So he rides a gold wing motorcycle. It's a great big motorcycle. Some of us may know what those are like. And he rode his motorcycle from Victoria to New York to the Aspen Tate motorcycle reunion. And you know, for somebody who's 90 years old to ride a huge motorcycle like that is pretty incredible, let alone good for 10,000 kilometers. And so a few years later, he sent me another picture, and now he's riding a 750 Honda Shadow. He downsized a little bit. He said the big motorcycle is getting too heavy to push around in the driveway. And then 3 years later, he sent me this picture. And so I think some of this is kind of ties in with what Audrey's studying in terms of primary control and secondary control and how people might adapt a little bit. Mr. Higham lives in Toronto. He flew many bombing missions. And when he came back, he was an Air Canada pilot for the rest of his career. He lives in Toronto now and has taken up woodworking. So he sent us a picture of his woodworking skills and notes that they're for sale. So I note, I suppose, that I've purchased one of these, and so has Madge right now. We've talked a fair amount about the Successful Aging Questionnaire, and on our questionnaire, on the last page, we have a section that says, you know, what's your definition of successful aging? Bunch of lines, and they write things in. Mr. Higham wrote me a poem about successful aging, and I'd like to read it to you. So instead of writing his narrative, he composed this poem for me. And he said, when you take too many pills for your body's malfunctions and your brain is a whirl with impossible options, when your kids are retired and full of advice, and when the kids on the street think you're not very nice, when your legs start to cramp in the cold and the damp, and when the steps to the porch are replaced in the night. Successful aging, you know, I call it twilight. So, I mean, some people get questionnaires in the mail and may not pay a lot of attention to them all the time, and other people think about it quite seriously. And I think that it's the commitment and the dedication of these study members that, you know, it's not kind of a job coming into the office in the morning. It's an incredibly rewarding experience to be able to work with these men. I want to show you this. We sent out these questionnaires. They all come back within a few weeks. And this envelope showed up in the mail one day. And so we opened the envelope, and I took out this little piece of paper. So perhaps you can't read it from there, but it says, it's from Max. So it says, aging, I missed the most important part, the most important item, our genes. An aunt lived to be 101. All relatives live longer than what was the average, Max. So what Max had done is filled out his questionnaire, mailed it back, and then must have thought about it for a little while and decided he wanted to add a little bit more to what he was doing, stuck it in an envelope and mailed it to me. So I don't really know exactly who Max is. We have a couple of Maxes in our database, but the fact that Max contributed at all is incredible. Now, this last guy is Mr. Bertram. Now, Mr. Bertram was born in Rocky Mountain House in northern Alberta, and that's where he retired and passed away recently. And he's an incredible man. He flew in Bomber Command, and on one of his flights over Finland, he was shot down and taken prisoner of war at age 23. And he spent the 2.5 years in a POW camp in Germany. And he told me once on a questionnaire that he described his time in the POW camp as being a, quote, reluctant and intermittent guest. So tell me what a reluctant and intermittent guest might be in a POW camp. It's kind of interesting to think of how his life evolved. But one day he printed this picture on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope and mailed it to us. And I'm not sure if you saw anything of this picture yet, but there he is. He's on his porch in the backyard in Rocky Mountain House. He's in a wheelchair. And he's got this big gun across his knee. And across the bottom he wrote, anyone need a tail gunner? Now, I think some maybe once a military guy, all a military guy, right? And you know, it is amazing some of the rapport that we have with the study members. And one thing I hadn't mentioned yet is you learn in EPI class with a cohort study and a long-term study. One of the things you have to be careful about is like loss to follow-up and attrition, and what do you do with people who you can't keep track of. After 60 years of follow-up, so till July 1st, 2008, less than 2% of the original cohort have been lost. 58 people out of 4,000 after 60 years. So it's really, truly amazing the support and dedication that these men have for what we're doing. So I'd invite you to maybe ask some questions about any of what we talked about, and I also want to acknowledge long-term support, like how do you keep a study going for 64 years? So the initial support from the Air Force and from National Research Council, Medical Research Council, various things. NHRDP was the precursors to things like CIHR today. The Veterans Affairs and the University of Manitoba Center on Aging, immature CIHR. And terrific sort of support both in terms of contributions of material but also financial contributions from the study members. Sometimes when you send out these questionnaires in the spring, they'll fill them out and they write out a check made out to the Manitoba follow-up study for $10 or $50 or $100 or $1,000. Put it in the envelope and mail it back to us. I'm not sure that you'd find any study like that. Thanks very much.